Discover the incredible moment. I turned his insult into an unexpected transformation overnight. Emily stared at the counter, the greasy diner surface reflecting the chaos of the lunch rush, a blur of orders, complaints, and the impatient tapping of feet. Mr. Thompson loomed near the entrance, arms crossed, his shadow swallowing her whole as he surveyed the scene. The moment she spilled coffee on a regular, his voice thundered, "You know, this wouldn't happen if you had an actual education." The humiliation cut deeper than the burn of the hot liquid on her skin, igniting a familiar knot of anxiety in her stomach. Doubt crept in as whispers swept through her co-workers. Did they see her as inconsequential? A single mother with no degree, scraping by on 2 jobs while her son, Jake, navigated his own storm of troubles? It felt as if the weight of every unfulfilled dream pressed against her chest, squeezing out what little resolve she had left. Each day was a grind, a relentless cycle of waiting tables in a diner where people rarely looked her in the eye, then cleaning other people's homes until exhaustion blurred her thoughts. They needed her to be perfect, yet all she felt was inadequate. As the lunch rush began to settle, shaking fingers pushed her hair behind her ear. Resentment spiraled inside her. Why did Mr. Thompson need to remind her daily of her perceived failures? Faced with the decision to either shrink away or confront her reality, Emily pictured Jake, his troubled eyes scanning the world, desperate for approval. Nobody should feel like that. Not her son, nor the woman she had become. The anger bubbling within was a fire she couldn't ignore any longer. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can, leave a like. It really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Driving home that day, fists clenched around the steering wheel, Emily weighed her options. Fear snagged at her thoughts. What if Jake struggled like this forever? What if she ended up stuck in the diner until retirement, tears swallowed by a lifetime of resentment? Yet somewhere amidst the uncertainty, a flicker of hope nudged at her heart. Could she reclaim her dignity? It was hard to breathe, every exhalation laden with the demands of her current life. Taking a shaky breath, she made a decision, setting plans in motion for night classes at the community college. But in this atmosphere of change, whispers of doubt fought back. Was she just setting herself up for failure? Could she balance the demands of academia, work, and being a mother? The tension swelled like an impending storm, fragrant with a clash of anxiety and ambition. In the days that followed, she immersed herself in her new journey, but still felt the oppressive weight of Mr. Thompson's jeers wrapped around her like a shroud. Each encounter sucked energy, confidence slipping further from her grasp. Confronting the man who belittled her felt nearly impossible, yet the thought of standing up for herself throbbed in her chest like a beating drum, demanding to be acknowledged. But when the moment finally arrived to face Mr. Thompson, would the confrontation yield empowerment, or would it unravel her completely? Sweat dripped down her back as she rehearsed the words on her lips, heart racing with resolve and fear intertwined. With everything hanging in the balance, she steeled herself for what lay ahead. Could either of them hold the key to redemption, or would the past echo just as painfully into their futures? Emily stepped through the diner door, heart pounding against her ribs, feeling each thump echo the urgency of her determination. The bustling atmosphere had lost its intimidation, transforming instead into a canvas painted with potential. Her skin tingled with anticipation. Today was not just another day. This was the day she would challenge the status quo, not only for herself, but for Jake. Taking a deep breath, she brushed her fingers along the edge of the counter, grounding herself. Each smoothing motion brought clarity, a reminder of her newfound resolve. No matter how many times Mr. Thompson had belittled her, today she would reclaim her narrative. She was a mother, a worker, and a student. And she would no longer allow anyone to diminish her worth. As the lunch rush commenced, Emily maneuvered through the chaos, serving customers with the confidence she had long suppressed. Orders flowed in, but instead of drowning beneath the pressure of 2 jobs and classes, she found herself rising above it. With each plate served, a fire ignited within her. No longer invisible, she held her ground, empowering herself through each small success. The hours passed, punctuated by laughter, shouts, and the clatter of dishes. Yet in the recesses of her mind, she steeled herself for the confrontation with Mr. Thompson. It loomed larger than the towering meals she served, an impending storm she knew she had to face for herself to grow. When the moment finally arrived, she found him by the entrance, arms crossed with that all-too-familiar smirk. "Well, look who's here to make a mess. Let's hope you don't spill anything this time." The words felt like a slap, but instead of retreating, Emily straightened her back. A surge of defiance filled her. "Mr. Thompson," she began, her voice steady, "I've had enough of your insults. I'm taking night classes, and I'm going to prove to myself that I am more than just this job. I'm worth more than your derision." A stillness enveloped the diner, eyes drawn into the confrontation. The chatter faded, and the ringing silence transformed the air into something electric. Emily's heart raced, but the thrill of speaking her truth filled the empty spaces left by doubt. Mr. Thompson's eyes narrowed, surprise etched across his features momentarily before he masked it with disdain. "You think one evening class will make you special?" he scoffed, yet something in his gaze flickered, an irritation at being challenged. Each passing second stretched into eternity while Emily held her ground, heart thumping a relentless beat, emotions swirling together like a tempest. Did that flicker mean he sensed her potential? Perhaps it meant he saw her as competition now, shaking up the dynamics he'd so carefully curated. "I'm not doing this for you or anyone else," she continued, her voice rising above the murmurs of onlookers. "I'm doing this for Jake, and for every time you've tried to make me feel small. Today is the last day I let you have that power over me." In the face of his growing irritation, Emily felt renewed vigor coursing through her. Confronting him was liberating, a bittersweet taste of the freedom she yearned for, a feeling that resonated deeper than fear, a step into a larger world of intrigue and opportunity. But as she walked away, empowerment still fizzing within her, questions circled her mind. Had she truly initiated a change, or had she merely pricked the surface? What would Mr. Thompson do next? Was this the catalyst for a fierce new battle encompassing her courage and ambitions? Every ounce of her being trembled with anticipation as she stepped back into her routine, wondering what challenges lay ahead. It was the moment of reckoning, but what chaos or transformation would swell from it next? The chatter in the diner resumed its normal rhythm, but Emily's mind remained a chaotic whirlwind. She returned to her duties, yet she moved differently, each action more deliberate, every interaction infused with a fresh dose of resolve. She had traversed a boundary within herself, one that demanded her to act with intention. Although the shadow of Mr. Thompson's derision still loomed, a spark of ambition glimmered brighter now. As she poured coffee and refilled plates, Emily glanced toward the entrance, half expecting to see Mr. Thompson glowering at her from behind his corner of the counter. Yet the chair remained empty, and for the first time, she couldn't help but feel a tinge of confidence that she had disrupted the usual order of things. The thought both thrilled and unnerved her. The diner was Mr. Thompson's domain, but in that confrontation, she had claimed a small piece of it for herself. As the day transitioned into evening, her evening classes loomed on the horizon. The prospect of diving into textbooks and lecture notes was exhilarating after the battle she had just fought. Each moment spent learning could be another step towards her aspirations, a promise to herself that she wouldn't remain stagnant. While cleaning tables, she began to mentally strategize her course load. What classes would challenge her? Which instructors inspired growth? This was not just about holding her head high at work. It was about accumulating knowledge, gaining tools, and building a future. As customers finished meals, her thoughts turned to Jake. Her son needed to see that pursuing goals and confronting adversity was a part of life. She wanted to be his role model, a steadfast example of resilience and determination. The clock struck 7 as she clocked out, marking not the end of her day, but the beginning of a new chapter. With Jake eager to share his school stories, Emily soaked in his enthusiasm, laughing at his animated recounts. The spark of a common ambition ignited between the two, a shared understanding that they both sought to rise above challenges. Late that night, as she was preparing for bed and laying out her study materials for the first evening class, doubt crept in. Had she miscalculated the potential repercussions of her confrontation with Mr. Thompson? Was she really prepared to embrace this transformation? Confrontation could elicit retaliation, and she needed to remember that tension often invited turbulence. Still, that fear quelled under the weight of her newfound determination. Real change was rarely comfortable. She understood that her journey wouldn't be smooth. There would be trials that would test her resolve. But she felt it now, the urgency and vibrancy of living intentionally. It surged within her, reminding her of who she could become, and she didn't want to lose sight of it. As she nestled into bed, she could feel the pull of responsibility growing stronger, but rather than viewing it as a burden, Emily felt it transform into motivation. She had taken a stand, and alongside that conviction lay the promise of self-discovery. What was she truly capable of? The prospect shimmered with possibility, an uncharted territory waiting to be explored. But tomorrow, she would face Mr. Thompson again. The excitement that coursed through her veins mingled with trepidation, a concoction of anxiety and eagerness. Perhaps the real challenge awaited her in the crosshairs of this brewing conflict, one that would test every kernel of her growth. Would it empower her further, or would she find herself retreating back into conformity? Sleep swept over her as she questioned the unpredictable elements of the future. Tomorrow would be another defining moment, but would she seize it or watch it slip away? The morning light crept through the curtains, spilling soft rays onto the floor where Emily lay, still wrapped in the cocoon of her blankets. The world outside buzzed to life, but within her mind, a tempest churned. Each thought echoed Mr. Thompson's dismissal, his earlier words like arrows aimed directly at her aspirations. Yet somewhere in the swell of that chaos, a whisper of courage fought to break free. She rose with deliberate intention, the rhythm of her movements aligning with her resolve to confront the day ahead. She donned her uniform, each button a promise to herself that she wouldn't slip back into the shadows of her former self. Thoughts of Jake propelled her forward, reminding her that staying true to her convictions was more than a personal journey. It was a message to her son about perseverance and accountability. In the diner, the breakfast shift began with its usual clamor. Customers filed in, many with bleary eyes and sleepy smiles, searching for warmth in their mugs of coffee. Emily responded with a brightness that contrasted sharply with the presets of yesterday's routine. She approached each table not as a subordinate, but as a vital part of a bustling symphony, her presence contributing to the day's beginning. Mr. Thompson arrived promptly, his eyes scanning the diner as if searching for the cracks in the facade he believed she had erected. When their gazes met, the air thickened, an electric charge that signified far more than either dared to voice. She felt his scrutiny, a palpable weight that threatened to push her back into invisibility. But past the edges of that discomfort, a bubble of defiance began to swell. "Emily," he called, his tone sharp, slicing through the din of breakfast chatter. At that moment, the diner quieted, and every eye turned in her direction. "Yes, Mr. Thompson," she replied, meeting his gaze head-on. The words surfaced buoyed by a new fortitude. He leaned forward, a smirk creeping onto his lips. "What's with the new attitude? This isn't a classroom, it's a diner." His tone dripped with condescension, but Emily felt the pulse of the crowd around her. Their attention was no longer just on her performance as a waitress. It was on her as a person reclaiming her space. She stood tall, emotions whirling within her. Was he right? Was she too ambitious for this humble setting? But then she thought of Jake, and the indignation that filled her melted away her fear. "Actually, Mr. Thompson," she replied, her words gaining strength with each utterance, "I'm just trying to carve out my own place in this diner, just like everyone else." The murmurs from the patrons morphed into a wave of quiet approval. His smirk wavered, a brief flicker of confusion crossing his face. For the first time, she saw the tiniest crack in the armor he wore. That mask of authority slipped just enough for her to glimpse uncertainty. The tension in the room shifted, as if the collective breath had been held and was now released in relief. Emily felt something within her transform. She had not just survived his jab, she had danced with it, turning the insult into an opportunity for self-assertion. As her shift continued, she noticed a change in the energy of the diner. Her colleagues seemed to regard her with newfound respect, and customers, once dismissive, now engaged her with camaraderie, initiating small conversations that added layers to her days in the diner. Each interaction became a stepping stone, propelling her toward who she wanted to be. After the final customer left and the dishes piled high in the kitchen sink, she could finally breathe. Yet, even amid this success, a thought gnawed at her. Was this momentary victory enough to sustain her? Would Mr. Thompson find a way to retaliate? The thought of his potential backlash tensed her muscles, but this time, it ignited her determination. Emily faced the day with a new sense of purpose, yet still haunted by an underlying fear of reprisal. Would her moment of triumph open doors, or invite judgment? It was time to confront those looming uncertainties head-on. Tomorrow she would take another step into the unknown, one that promised growth, yet demanded courage she hadn't yet fully harnessed. Would the turmoil engulf her, or would it forge her into someone unbreakable? Morning light streamed again through Emily's bedroom window, but it felt different today, less like a herald of routine and more like a spotlight illuminating potential. Each beam urged her onward, beckoning her to seize the newness of the day. She wrapped her fingers around the edge of her blanket, taking a deep breath, and as she emerged from its comforting fold, she felt her spirit lift. Dressing became a ritual of affirmation rather than a chore. Today, she selected a slightly brighter shirt, its color a bold declaration of her resolve to be seen, to be heard, despite any looming threats from Mr. Thompson. With each movement, she pieced together the resolve to meet the day head-on. As she entered the diner, the familiar scent of brewing coffee intertwined with the fresh aroma of pancakes cooking on the grill. The bustle of the room seemed to hum with energy, and there, a flicker of surprise welled up within her. She found her colleagues sitting together, a small assembly of faces once unfamiliar, now joined by a shared sense of camaraderie. "Good morning, Emily," one of the cooks called out. A genuine smile broke across her face, and she responded with warmth. "Morning, everyone?" It was a small shift, yet it felt monumental. The tone of her interactions no longer felt costly or transactional, but invigorating, each conversation a brushstroke in the portrait she was becoming. The morning shift arrived with a steady stream of customers, and with it, a chance to manifest the inner strength she had begun to build. She poured coffee and filled orders, laughter bubbling up in her exchanges. As she moved through the din, she caught glimpses of Mr. Thompson observing from a distance, the scorn in his gaze momentarily overshadowed by uncertainty. She felt the cracks in his authority widen, and it fueled her with a wild surge of defiance. Yet, shadows of doubt lingered, threatening to seep into her newfound bravado. Would it be fleeting? She worried about Mr. Thompson's judgment and what it might do to her growing reputation among her peers. She had stood up to him, but had she stirred a deeper resentment within him? Such thoughts had a way of creeping into her mind when it was quiet. After a particularly busy morning, Emily retreated to the break room, her heart racing from the adrenaline of the shifts. Leaning against the counter, she stared into the mirror, scrutinizing the woman reflected. Had she really changed, or was she only masquerading as something else? The same fear loomed, the fear of collapsing back into the identity she had fought so hard to leave behind. In that moment of reflection, she realized, to survive in a world that often demanded compliance, she needed not just bravery, but a strategy. She started to draft a plan, one that would cultivate the confidence she felt budding in her soul. Perhaps it was time to seek out training opportunities, something that could empower her beyond the diner. Could online courses in management or communication help forge her path to something more? As she mulled over this strategy, the door creaked open, and one of her colleagues entered the break room, curiosity etched on their face. Observing Emily's concentration, they asked, "You okay in here?" "Yeah," she replied, momentarily startled. "Just thinking about what comes next for me." The reflection of their interest ignited a new sense of responsibility. This was not just about her anymore. It was about setting an example for those who might feel just as lost in their lives. "What about you?" she inquired. "What do you want to do?" As they shared ideas, Emily felt a warmth spread through her. They too battled the same acceptance in their lives. Emerging from her reverie, resolute thoughts danced in her mind. She could embrace this moment, harness it into something that empowered not just herself, but anyone who felt overlooked. Yet the lurking threat of Mr. Thompson remained. His skepticism could easily stifle her aspirations. She rose from her place of contemplation, her mind ignited with new possibilities. Today was not just a day of work, it would mark the beginning of her ascent. Would she grasp the opportunities coming her way, or allow the fear of judgment to halt her progress? As she walked back onto the floor, determination thrummed with every step. A confrontation with Mr. Thompson seemed inevitable, but perhaps this could become a pivotal moment, not just for her, but for all who watched. The stakes had never been higher, and she knew she needed to prepare for whatever came next. Was she ready to face the ultimate test of her newfound strength? The moment of reckoning loomed closer with each breath. Emily returned to the bustling floor of the diner, her pulse quickening with anticipation. The scent of breakfast filled the air, the clatter of dishes and laughter from customers blending into a chaotic symphony that somehow felt comforting. Yet beneath the noise, a quiet urgency hummed within her, driving her toward the uncertainties of the day ahead. As she navigated between tables laden with plates and steaming mugs, the specter of Mr. Thompson loomed larger in her mind. He had always been a source of intimidation, wielding criticism like a blade. But today, she felt a wild determination rising within her. There would be no retreat, no succumbing to the doubts he tried to instill. "Hey, Emily, can you help me with this order?" called one of the waiters, breaking her focus. With a brisk nod, she crossed the room, feeling the strength in her legs propel her forward. Each step was imbued with a newfound purpose, a promise to herself that she wouldn't let fear dictate her actions anymore. But just as she reached out to grab the tray, the door swung open with a creak that silenced the din. Mr. Thompson entered, his presence a storm cloud that threatened to stifle the air around her. He scanned the room with an unyielding gaze, and when his eyes locked onto Emily, they burned with scrutiny. The confidence she had channeled began to falter, and her stomach tightened. Yet it was at that moment, seeing the flicker of uncertainty in his expression, that something within her ignited. She straightened her back, squared her shoulders, and approached him, each footfall echoing with purpose. The diner faded into the background. It was just her and him now. "Mr. Thompson?" she began, her voice steady, though she felt her heart race. "I wanted to discuss the new responsibilities in the diner. I believe it's time we consider some changes to improve our workflow." His brow furrowed, skepticism etched onto his features. "And what would you know about running this place?" he shot back, his words dripping with condescension. "Stick to serving, Emily. That's where you belong." An electric jolt of anger surged through her, fighting against her previous trepidation. Was he really suggesting that she did not have the capability to grow? To challenge herself? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Instead of retreating, she decided to pivot. "I might be a server, but I'm also observant," she said, holding his gaze. "I've noticed where things could improve. Forging a more efficient team could benefit us all, including the patrons we serve. I believe I can contribute much more than what you assume." His lips twitched into a hint of a sneer, but there was a flicker of something else, an acknowledgement perhaps, or disbelief. This moment felt monumentally significant, not just for her, but for anyone else within earshot. Could she stand her ground against his dismissive attitude, and in doing so, inspire their co-workers? Her courage swelled as she pressed on. She formulated a concise proposal in her mind. "What if I led some group sessions to propose solutions? I'd be eager to gather feedback and work on implementing those improvements alongside everyone. It could foster teamwork, something we desperately need." His flippant dismissal was imminent, that much she could read on his face. But instead of feeling diminished, she felt invigorated. Maybe he couldn't see her potential, but that didn't mean she wouldn't bring it forth, come what may. "Do you really think you can challenge years of my expertise based on a few shifts?" he replied, a mockery laced through his tone. "I believe it's time for new ideas," Emily shot back, the words flowing from her with an unexpected fierceness. "Change doesn't always come from those at the top. Sometimes it's the ones on the ground who can see the bigger picture." She watched as his expression hardened. This was a man unaccustomed to being questioned. Yet for every fiber in his being that screamed disbelief, she felt something brand new blossom within her. Each word felt more powerful than a mere defense. It was a proclamation of her worth. As she turned back to the counter, the weight of the confrontation still settled on her shoulders, but a new fire ignited in her heart. Employees had begun to watch their exchange, their expressions a mixture of awe and newfound respect. Emily realized she had transcended the role of a mere server. She was becoming a leader. Yet as she faced the work ahead, a lingering question floated through her mind. Would Mr. Thompson seek to undermine her efforts, or had she shifted the balance of power? New resolve settled within her as she plotted her next steps. The road ahead promised challenges, but she was ready to confront them. Emily could feel the day turning in her favor, a dawning realization of her potential. But as much as she wanted to ride this wave of triumph, deep down she sensed the brewing storm of retaliation. What was she prepared to do if Mr. Thompson countered her efforts? Would she fold under pressure, or double down on her commitment to change? Emily's mind whirred with possibilities, each more daunting than the last. The challenge had begun, and she had a choice to make. Would she let faint echoes of doubt stifle her journey, or would she rise up with an unstoppable force? The hum of the diner turned into a low buzz as Emily stepped back from her interaction with Mr. Thompson, her pulse still racing. Moments of vulnerability often became the crucibles for confidence, and she had just ignited a spark. The din of conversations around her faded, replaced by a singular focus on the task ahead. She stood behind the counter, staring into the steaming pot of coffee as if it held the answers to her unspoken challenges. Her colleagues, once a swirling crowd of nameless faces, now felt like allies poised to either rise with her or remain shackled under a cloud of complacency. Emily glanced at each of them, still reeling from the confrontation they had unwittingly witnessed. But with every gaze returned to her, she felt the weight of responsibility settle over her like a tight-fitting coat. She had cast the first stone, and the ripples were beginning to resonate further than she had anticipated. Could she really lead this team? Was she prepared for the consequences of her bold proposal? Determined to channel her budding leadership, she cleared her throat and called out to the nearest coworker. "Hey Lisa, can we talk about the workflow for a minute?" Lisa, a fellow waitress whose kindness often masked her insecurities, approached with curiosity. "Sure, what's on your mind?" Emily motioned for her to join her at the corner of the counter, away from prying ears. "I've been thinking about how we can better communicate during busy hours. Sometimes it feels chaotic, orders get missed, and I know we can do better. Would you be interested in helping me brainstorm some ideas?" Lisa's face lit up with a mixture of surprise and enthusiasm. "I'd love that. You're right. It's often a mess trying to keep up. What do you have in mind?" As Emily spoke, the initial flickers of doubt began to shrink and dissolve, replaced by the clarity of a vision forming in her mind. She could see a series of potential solutions: a scheduling board where they could track the busiest times, designated roles for peak hours, even a quick huddle to align on special orders before each shift began. But her ideas took on a life of their own as Emily illuminated the possibilities, igniting the same excitement within Lisa. They began to outline the changes, moving from identifying problems to creatively addressing them. Each word exchanged filled the air with a potency she hadn't realized lay dormant in their partnership. Yet, lurking behind the splendor of their moment, a subtle tension remained. Emily knew Mr. Thompson would not take her initiative lightly. The moment he pressed his lips together in disapproval, dismissing her before, haunted her. Could she really confront him again? This was not simply a critique of operations, it was her challenge to his authority. The soft chime of the doorbell interrupted her thoughts, and a wave of recognition swept over her as Mr. Thompson's figure filled its frame. He was back, scanning the room once more with that same penetrating gaze. Emily's heart hammered again, but this time it wasn't fear, it was resolve. "Seems we're busy today," he said, his voice oily with sarcasm. "Can't even keep an eye on my own employees." Emily's knuckles whitened on the counter, but instead of recoiling, she leaned in, parting her lips to speak. "Actually, I was just discussing how we can improve our teamwork and efficiency during peak hours," she offered, each word heavy with purpose. Expectation clung thick in the air, and with every beat of silence that followed, she weighed her options carefully. Would he dismiss her idea with a flick of his wrist, or would he engage? Feeling the charged atmosphere, Emily locked eyes with him, silently drafting the next steps in her mind. She couldn't retreat. She had already edged too far into uncharted territory. The challenge was not only external but deeply internal, a battle between her desire to lead and the fears that nagged at her core. "Let's have a meeting later this week," Mr. Thompson replied, his tone unexpectedly neutral. "We'll see if your ideas hold any weight." His ambiguous stance could either signify grudging respect or the beginning of an intensified conflict. Emily was aware this was no small move, but as he turned to rejoin the fray of customers, she felt a rush of triumph ignite within her. What had once felt like a solitary fight transformed into a collective journey, bound together by shared visions and aspirations. Yet, as her adrenaline began to ebb, a gnawing question coiled back through her mind. How would she prepare for this meeting, and what if Mr. Thompson dismissed her and her colleagues entirely? With her resolve steadfast but the threat of rejection looming ever closer, Emily faced a realization that she was now at a perilous precipice. The next step could either propel her to new heights or crash her ambitions into despair. As the day wore on, Emily scanned the diner, searching for encouragement in her crew's faces. Deep down, she knew the upcoming meeting with Mr. Thompson held pivotal consequences. The stakes had never been greater, and she could sense both fear and opportunity in equal measure. Would she break through barriers, or watch her dreams shatter against the walls of authority? The impending confrontation loomed large, and Emily was poised on the brink, ready to either rise or fall. The days leading up to the meeting with Mr. Thompson felt like an eternity, pressing down on Emily's shoulders like an unwelcome weight. At times, the diner felt claustrophobic, as if the walls themselves were closing in, holding her captive in a cage of self-doubt. Each order she took, Every coffee she poured was overshadowed by a nagging voice in her head, questioning her worthiness to lead, to innovate, to challenge. As the clock ticked closer to the appointed time, Emily's thoughts became a chaotic cacophony. She studied her reflection in the back of the silver coffee pot, searching for signs of the leader she yearned to be. "You have to show him," she whispered to herself, her voice edged with urgency. "You can't let him see you falter." The resolve behind her words settled within her like unshakable determination. That morning, before her shift, she sat down with a notepad, determined to map out her ideas. The flow of her thoughts spilled onto the pages, highlighted areas for discussion, bullet points outlining proposed strategies, and potential counter-arguments against Mr. Thompson's possible objections. With each stroke of the pen, her anxiety transformed into preparation, a shifting of the mental landscape from passive concern to active engagement. The diner buzzed around her as she worked, each of her colleagues carrying on with their daily routines, blissfully unaware of the tempest brewing beneath Emily's composed exterior. She caught Lisa's eye and saw a flicker of encouragement, a silent agreement that they were embarking on this journey together. It warmed her, but it also added weight. The stakes were no longer just about her. She was now responsible for her team's hopes, their aspirations to improve. When the time finally arrived, the meeting room felt like a coliseum. She and her co-workers gathered in a tight circle, exchanging nervous glances, their unity palpable in the air. Each member held their breath as Mr. Thompson strode in, his presence demanding immediate attention. The tension threatened to erase all the initiative Emily had built, but she clutched her notes with a vice grip, grounding herself in the knowledge she had prepared. She began with a steadier voice than she had anticipated. "Thank you for meeting with us, Mr. Thompson. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss some ideas that I believe can significantly boost our efficiency during the busy hours." Each word was a small rebellion, a rippling tide against the rocky shore of his discontent. Mr. Thompson leaned back, arms crossed, with a skeptical eyebrow raised. "Go on." Emily dove into her points, flushed with adrenaline and a burgeoning confidence that eclipsed her earlier fears. "I propose we establish a protocol for busy shifts, where each role is clearly defined beforehand. This will streamline our efforts and minimize mistakes, especially during peak hours." As she progressed, she recalled the vivid moments spent collaborating with Lisa, energizing her pitch by recalling their brainstorming sessions and the excitement they shared. It turned into an argument not just for efficiency, but for a more connected and empowered team, a vision infused with camaraderie rather than competition. With every point she made, she perceived Mr. Thompson's posture shifting slightly, the skepticism giving way to a tentative intrigue. "You really believe this will work?" he challenged, skepticism still clinging to his tone but mixed with curiosity. Drawing a breath, Emily took a step forward, verbalizing her conviction. "I know it will work. This is bigger than just making orders run smoother. It's about building a resilient team that takes ownership of their tasks." The room hummed with quiet anticipation, her colleagues leaning closer, faces lit with hope and anxiety. Mr. Thompson's eyes narrowed. "What's to say your little plan won't cause more chaos?" In that moment, Emily's heart raced, but she realized this was what she had prepared for, the crossroads between her timid self and the robust leader she aimed to become. She engaged him directly, meeting his gaze with a steady resolve, feeling the collective breath of her team behind her. She wasn't just proposing changes, she was challenging the status quo, and she could feel the fire emerging within her. The difference lies in uniting our voices rather than letting chaos dictate our actions. We can redefine how this diner operates. The air hung thick with unspoken consequences. She had invoked his challenge and emerged with clarity rather than retreat. Would the flames of her convictions earn respect or wrath? As the meeting reached its climax, an unfamiliar thrill coursed through Emily, a feeling she had never known until this moment of audacity. Would Mr. Thompson embrace her initiative, or would he foster an environment that would crush their dreams beneath old standards? This wasn't merely about a proposal anymore. It was a fight for the future of her aspirations, of ambitions that replaced apathy with possibility. The stage was set, uncertainty swirled, but she felt herself standing on the precipice of transformation. Would this meeting mark the dawn of a new era for Emily and her colleagues, or would it strip away the hard-earned resolve she had finally discovered within herself? The answer lingered tantalizingly close, wrapped in the anticipation of Mr. Thompson's response. The silence that followed Emily's bold statement felt like a swirling storm inside her. Every second stretched, weighing down on her with looming uncertainty. Mr. Thompson's scrutiny was unnerving, as if he were peeling back layers of her resolve to expose the vulnerabilities she had fought so hard to conceal. But instead of shrinking away, Emily leaned into her discomfort. She understood that this was the moment, one that could catapult her forward or drag her back into the shadows from which she was emerging. His silence shifted from skepticism to contemplation, igniting a flicker of hope within her. "Your plan?" he began slowly. "It could work, but it will require everyone to commit fully. Mutual support." Emily seized on the opening. "Exactly, Mr. Thompson. It's about fostering a culture of support. If we define roles clearly and enhance communication, each team member will feel invested in the process. They won't just be a cog in the machine, they'll be part of something bigger." She noted how several heads nodded gently among her coworkers. Their support created an unexpected warmth, invigorating her energy. The atmosphere transformed, shifting from apprehension to a coalition spirit, something she hadn't anticipated so swiftly. However, Thompson remained skeptical. "With busy hours, people are often overwhelmed. You think your proposal will substantially mitigate stress?" Momentarily, doubt pressed at her again. Could her conviction withstand such resistance? Emily refused to let fear mute her voice this time. "Yes, Mr. Thompson, establishing protocols isn't merely about operations. It's mental clarity in chaos. When we know our roles, we can focus, rather than scatter when the pressure rises." A silence followed, pregnant with the weight of his possible rejection, but she could see a flicker beneath his disciplined demeanor. Was it curiosity? Intrigue? Emily pondered the hidden depths of his skepticism and felt an odd kinship. Perhaps he, too, was trapped in expectations that muted creativity. "Let's run a trial," he finally proposed, words laced with reluctance. "A month-long shift where you implement this protocol without any hindrance from management. If it fails, we will revert to the old ways." A gasp of disbelief surged among her co-workers, and Emily felt the air crackle with anticipation. She straightened her spine. "Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Thompson. We won't disappoint you." The meeting concluded with scattered applause. While Mr. Thompson exited with his characteristic stoicism, Emily felt her heart buoyed by the approval of her peers. The moment throbbed with the promise of change, and yet, beneath exhilaration, lay an undercurrent of trepidation. They had a mountain to climb, a daunting task ahead. The diner's atmosphere had transformed, reinvigorated with the promise of possibility. But Emily was not naive to think the journey would be easy. Fear of underperformance slid in like a shadow, whispering warnings to keep her grounded. Her victory didn't guarantee success. It merely provided a platform to build something ahead. That evening she found herself back at home, staring at her reflection in the same silver coffee pot from earlier. Her eyes glimmered back, reflecting not just her determination but a new vulnerability, one that reminded her of the challenge ahead. As the night deepened, she jotted down ideas and strategies for integrating the new protocol, a fervent resolve propelling her pen across the paper. She discovered a latent focus, a drive she had never fully explored before. She was not just an employee but a leader in the making. It was a tantalizing transition, yet Emily felt the stakes rise. Could she inspire the team to embrace their roles fully, without falling into the old patterns that Mr. Thompson had cultivated over the years? She recognized an impending challenge, looming like the storm clouds that gathered before a deluge. Yet this time, she intended to challenge storms, not merely weather them. The following day would demand not only her plans but her influence. Could the leader she was growing into inspire her team to rise above? Would they grasp this chance for empowerment, or would fear tether them back to their old ways? As she drifted off to sleep, questions spun in her mind, echoing an urgency for answers. Each question unfurled another layer of Emily's resolve. Soon she'd find out who would rise to the occasion alongside her. Tomorrow, she would take the first step into a new tomorrow, or allow doubt to shackle her aspirations once more. What decisions awaited her at dawn? The bright morning sun filtered through Emily's kitchen window, illuminating the very decisions that had led to this moment. Today marked the start of implementing change at the diner, a culmination of dreams, empowerment, and the resolute step into leadership she had taken not just for herself, but for her team. The prospect both thrilled and terrified her. As she dressed, her mind ran through a mental checklist of the protocols she intended to introduce at today's shifts, the role assignments, the increased communication strategies, and the much-anticipated team huddles. The twinge of doubt still tried to creep in, but she silenced it with the rallying thoughts of her team's support. They believed in her, If they could break the chains of complacency together, anything was possible. Arriving at the diner, the familiar smells of coffee and breakfast wafted toward her with a welcoming embrace. Her colleagues' faces greeted her with eager anticipation. The shift had begun with vibrant inquiries about how they could best support her new initiatives. Emily felt the pulse of their enthusiasm. The air was charged, ripe for transformation. "Let's gather for a quick huddle before we start serving," she suggested, her heart pounding in sync with the weight of their collective expectations. She took the lead toward a corner booth, an impromptu meeting spot bustling with a mix of energy and anxiety. "Okay, team, I appreciate all of you being here," she began, her voice steady with purpose. "Today, we're going to implement some organizational changes. I know we've faced chaos during peak hours, but with clear role definitions and better communication, we can tackle challenges together." Facial expressions shifted from uncertainty to hope, igniting a spark across the group. "What do you mean by clear roles?" Lisa asked, her brow furrowed with curiosity. "Great question. From now on, we'll have designated roles for each busy shift. Every person will know exactly what's expected, which will help us keep the workflow consistent," Emily explained, vision solidifying as she communicated her strategy. As she elaborated on her plans, she watched her co-workers light up with purpose, engaged in the discussion and eager to contribute their input. As they exchanged ideas, their initial reticence faded, transforming into a collaborative spirit that surged through the room. With each passing moment, Emily felt a profound shift within herself, a growth fostered by the collective force of her team, embracing shared responsibility. But lest she forget the looming presence of Mr. Thompson, she mentally prepared herself for any confrontational response he might direct her way. Today's success depended as much on her internal resolve as on her cohort. When the rush began, Emily felt like she had awakened a sleeping beast, energy pulsing through the diner as orders flowed in. Back and forth she darted, delivering drinks and communicating with her team like a conductor guiding an orchestra. It was collaborative magic. The rhythm of the diner no longer felt chaotic but beautifully synchronized. Yet no triumph comes without its trials. Toward midday, the rush escalated, and in the heat of the moment, an order slipped through the cracks. Amidst the frantic pace, she knew she had to make a choice, to retreat into panic or confront it with the leadership she had begun to cultivate. "Hey everyone, we missed Table 6's dessert order. Let's tackle this as a team," she called out, her heart racing anew as she rallied her co-workers to tackle the unforeseen challenge. The collective effort soared as each team member jumped into action, teaming up to rectify the situation swiftly. Grateful for their support, Emily felt the positivity elevate her spirit, nourishing the growth she had sought to embody. They were moving as one cohesive unit, an intricate web of communication replacing the isolation she had previously felt. As the rush subsided, Emily took a moment to breathe, glancing toward the entrance where Mr. Thompson stood watching with arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Anticipation gripped her. Would he choose to undermine her efforts, or would he acknowledge the change blooming around him? With trepidation and hope intertwined, she approached him, her heart steadying with resolve. "Good afternoon, Mr. Thompson. We've been working on your trial run. They're genuinely excited about it." His gaze shifted across the busy diner, eyes narrowing as his skepticism threatened to corrode her budding confidence. "We'll see if this is sustainable. I'm not convinced this is the way to a well-functioning diner." His dismissive tone stung, but Emily had forged forward through far too much to falter now. Confrontation hadn't unraveled her before. It had become a bedrock of her transformation. "I understand your concerns," she replied, feeling the words build strength. "But I believe there's potential here. Each team member is stepping up, and the feedback from today's shift has already been positive." "I'll reserve my judgment for now," he said flatly. Yet a glimmer of something shifted in his expression, perhaps admiration mingled with irritation. With her spirits buoyed by the progress, Emily dove back into her duties, buoyed by her convictions. Days and weeks morphed into ripples of momentum as the diner transformed into a place of collaboration, where Emily's leadership fostered a culture where voices mattered beyond just what plates could be served. Recognition followed. When the diner's management acknowledged the shifts in team dynamics at the next staff meeting, she realized her efforts had not only been seen, but valued. Applause resonated across the room, a wave of acknowledgement washing over the team. They had collectively proven themselves capable of more than just being cogs. They were agents of change. As Emily stood there, pride swelling in her chest, she finally felt the weight of inadequacy begin to lift. She became both student and teacher, a role she had never anticipated but embraced fully. The empowerment she sought for herself became the transformation of those around her, including her precious son, Jake. Reflecting on her journey, Emily saw the stark contrast between who she had once been and who she had become. A fighter, a leader, and a role model. She had turned Mr. Thompson's criticisms into fuel for her transformation, redirecting the negative energy into a source of motivation that propelled her forward. With courage and continual growth, Emily had achieved her transformational milestone. And as she watched her colleagues flourish, she remembered that leadership was not simply a position, it was a conjunction of nurturing and confronting, driving forward with purpose. As she looked into the faces of her team, those she had once served, now unified in shared aspirations, she felt an unmistakable warmth blossom in her heart. They had found collective achievement in every small victory, breathing life back into their diner. Emily Saunders was no longer just scraping by. She had emerged into her full potential and empowered others to do the same. Now, here's the pivotal moment. You need to subscribe now to ensure you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm because your support matters. Comment your reactions and theories about Emily's transformation. Share instantly this story with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to show your support.